Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random.
Exceptional Radio. Hello, everyone. Today is Sunday, January 30th. It's actually sunny for once, even though it's the middle or end of winter, depending on how you look at it. It's been pretty overcast and without sun for the past week, so this is a nice break.
And if for those who may be paying attention, we're actually in the same room for the first time in, like, what is it, 2 years now?
Yeah, I think 2 years. Yeah, pre-pandemic times were different. Well, and it's funny, like, it gives you some weird sense of invincibility when you haven't gotten COVID. And that's where, like, I don't think it's just me because I've taken anti-malarials before. And there's it's actually like a side effect of anti-malarials that you get like a heightened sense of invincibility, or there's like hallucinations that come with it. So I wouldn't be surprised if they'll find out that like the vaccine comes with some weird side effect of like the perception of invincibility, like, and that's where again, like having taken anti-malarials before, which you only really have to take them if you're going to a place where
you can get malaria,
right? And you don't like the way I had to go about even acquiring them was like such a wake up on the process, in that like you have to prove that you're going to somewhere that is going to have malaria to get malarial drugs, where it's like you can't just go get malaria pills.
I mean, I don't think I can go get like a anthrax vaccine.
Right.
I can't walk into CVS or Walgreens and buy I mean, what other vaccines do they have that are actually like really like a rotavirus vaccine? I mean, that's built into our rice now, so.
Yeah. I mean, I had to even go to a different city to get them. Yeah, it was like...
So, I don't have this like heightened sense of invincibility. What I've been experiencing is this like enhanced fear of large crowds and even a warehouse type shopping experience like Menards or Lowe's. That's still too congested for me. I find driving in traffic to be the most anxiety-inducing experience now. Mm-hmm. And I've driven all over the place. I haven't like, it's not like I don't have wheel time.
Right.
It's more that when I see people out now, it feels like there's an even greater sense of urgency.
To go nowhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been thinking about this. There is definitely some heightened sense of importance on one's own time, and that's where people get impatient and like the road rage and the rushing to know where it comes from. But there is an excessive the idea of independence and being a person who has importance within society as that individual. There's just too much emphasis on that in the cultural progression of an individual. And I think one of the problems is Americans don't read. And I think it's not even that, oh, you need to read a book so much as what I'm starting to think is it's not the book so much as sitting down to do a continuous activity for a long period of time. Because then it's not that, like, I'm not a person who's like, oh, ADHD isn't real. It's not that so much as if you look at the way our society and media continuously encourages and incorporates like breaks in thought, it's really hard to actually have a continuous thought in America, whether it's because you get interrupted from an advertisement, which
one
is
of your friends,
right? But most of the time, it's actually an advertisement, one way or another.
So you made me think about something for a second there. I think what happens in isolation, because that's kind of what we have to do to be safe during Plague World. People's worlds get smaller, and when you're a part of a community, you realize just how broad that community can actually be, and where people's specializations lie, and where your specializations may fit in. But when it's just an individual essentially trapped inside their home, inside their own mind, and they haven't built their home or their mind for that kind of solitary existence, even if they have, living companions or a significant or kids or whatever, cats, dogs, it doesn't matter, because we're not really equipped for that kind of existence. And so the smaller our world becomes, the more important we become in our own world. And so when individual worlds have to interact, because there's a road out there, or there's a sidewalk, or at some point somebody has to go to the grocery store, and you have to interact with somebody. At that point, the world it expands exponentially. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that isolation or solitary existence leads to a place where coexisting can happen.
Yeah.
It takes a very resilient mind to be able to withstand solitary existence and then still go back to a society and function like a normal person. Very resilient mind.
Yeah. Well, especially when that society is rewarding the hyper-individual for being able to express that individuality in some unique or novel way. So then it's almost as if people get encouraged to act out. And that's where the societal rewards have become at odds with civil behavior in a way. And I think that's kind of, I don't think it's accidental in that there was always a cat, and this is something I just saw that's funny. Now there's like anti-caste discrimination legislation being incorporated into American education system, and it's funny in that they associate it with Asian, like East Asian practices, as if there's no caste system in America, and that's what to me becomes the biggest that diversion of division to make it seem as if there are other places that are more divided feudally than America. Keep it in a place where people can perpetually make it seem as if we're still actually better than them, even if we have our problems. Yeah, we haven't quite figured out racism yet, but at least we're not those people with the caste system, those regressive people. So then you get like anti-caste legislation or anti-caste protection into American policies before America solved its own racism.
There's some illiterate person in like Arkansas, Louisiana, who thinks this is about fishing.
Yeah.
It's a very innocuous situation we exist with. it's not always obvious where somebody sits in like the socioeconomic strata, because sometimes people wear their wealth and sometimes people behave their wealth, and class isn't always something that makes sense. I've met some insanely wealthy low class dudes who were like, you know, what's the kid from Charlie Brown who was always like rolling in the dirt? Pigpen, yeah. They were like straight up Pigpen, but they were like financially very savvy. They just didn't look it. And then I've met, you know, some people who come from some money who they're probably going to run out of money before their parents, you know, whatever they had set up for them is like supposed to.
That's the way I see a lot of generational wealth ending up. It's like the first generation makes it, the second generation tries to preserve it, and then the third generation just burns it. And it's usually pretty, I didn't even come up with that framing so much as like.
No, that's a fairly common framework.
Yeah, and it holds up pretty well as far as I can tell, in that the third generation has no concept of how the money came about, so they don't have any idea of how to create like a funnel of production, whether they're the ones producing or somebody else is. So it doesn't, like, they can own a factory, but they don't understand the inner workings of the factory because it just got handed off to them.
Yeah.
Or a restaurant or whatever the revenue generating engine is, they don't understand it to keep it running. And whether it's because someone within it starts exploiting that and siphoning, or just because they're not managing it well, the thing ends up falling apart for one reason or another, and it gets, you know, sold off or you know, just goes under. And this is like perpetually what happens with a lot of these generational industrial companies that get passed off, which is where the boards came in. But even then, the boards get at odds with the organization itself, because the boards only start caring about
bottom lines,
but then that means the product starts to suffer. So I don't know, have you ever heard of Capricorn One?
No, but it sounds like some kind of investment hedge fund.
I mean, yeah, I guess that definitely could be one of those investment hedge funds use random shit. But it's an old movie about the faking of I forget if it was Mars landing. Is he the Mars of the? I forget exactly which. That's not even the most important aspect of it. Is like the the story is like NASA is trying to beat the Russians to either the. I feel like it's Mars.
Russia beat us to Venus.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Russia's had a really advanced space program for a long time.
Russia was the first to have a lander, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
Like once it hit, it just touched down and basically crapped out. So like the idea is that I'm pretty sure they're trying to get to Mars. So long story short, the NASA shuttle program was trying to also make the most efficient and most economic shuttle, and they cut too many corners, and they realized before launch that they knew the heat shield wouldn't hold up because they used too cheap of a material, because the defense contractor needed to make their hit their budget mark. So this is like 1979. The crux of the film is that because of capitalist practices and hitting the bottom line, what was meant to be the biggest scientific endeavor of the species ends up having to be faked because they can't admit that they failed. And then further, the process about which they essentially built a failed launch vehicle, they couldn't acknowledge that that process failed, so they had to cover it up. So they went through with the fake launch or the fake landing. And what the astronauts realized is like, hey, they're not going to let us live with this secret. And they thought at first that they were doing the whole thing is the ethical quandary of, are we doing the right thing by lying to the American people about what happened to preserve the idea that we're the most advanced scientific nation on the planet. So then they're having this fucking O.J. Simpson's in it randomly before he, became the killer.
I almost feel like the inclusion of O.J. Simpson at this point renders it something like one of those Leslie Nielsen movies where it's definitely a farce. Although at one point he was probably taken seriously.
Oh, so, yeah. I mean, have you seen Towering Inferno?
Yeah.
Yeah, O.J. Simpson was very seriously. I mean,
he wasn't. He had a broad range of talents.
Yeah, and it's not that a lot of people tried to discredit him, but it's like, hey, for somebody who was a fucking football player, he did what he could, and it's like, I wasn't even alive, so I have nothing to do with that shit. But it's like, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that O.J. Simpson was a terrible actor just because he's a terrible human being. Like,
no, I think in everything that I could think of him, I enjoyed it.
Because he's not bad.
No, he's not bad. He's actually funny.
Yeah,
he's probably the funniest football player that I can think of.
He's not great, but he's not terrible. So that's where it's like, anybody who's like, O.J. Simpson's a terrible actor, you're fucking lying. He's not terrible. He's not great, and it's the issue of when somebody's crossing over from something.
I think you could hang with like Leslie Nielsen and those Naked Gun crowd. Like if you can hang with those guys, you're funny. You're doing something right.
Yeah.
Because they were serious about comedy.
Well, and Leslie Nielsen was like a serious actor at first, so knowing how long his career was and how, as we got introduced to him in his comedy phase. But then you go back and look and see, early on when he was like a heartthrob type deal, and it's like, holy shit, that's the same Leslie Nielsen.
That's where that face comes from, where he's just like, huh?
Yeah. But it's hard, I try to be realistic about stuff when looking at it, and then like, okay, for example, Jodorowsky is pretentious garbage as a director. Motherfuckers be like, oh, Jodorowsky's Dune or some shit. Where it's like, I gave him a chance. Dude's just a pretentious hack that people will then...
That's that really colorful Dune that didn't get made, right?
Yeah. But it's because the director's a hack that tries to hide behind abstract shit and be like, you just don't get it. Because then that's where I'm like, I'm looking at
real surreal art doesn't require that defense.
Right, exactly.
That's it
doesn't.
That's the litmus test. It doesn't require defense to be surreal. If someone has to defend the surreal nature of visual communication, then they've already failed.
Well, and that's why Dali's so ubiquitous among surrealists, because it's like, it's so obvious that it doesn't need any explanation. And that's where I think in it to a degree, especially when it's abstract, anybody's interpretation has some validity if they are educated in art. The issue becomes when a layperson with no intention of educating themselves about art tries to make make commentary about something as if that perspective is valid just because they have eyes. And I think that's the problem, is like, just because somebody can look at something and assess it doesn't mean their perspective is actually valid upon that thing, because they may not be remotely informed enough to be like, I understand the feeling I have from this thing. They may not understand how to express that. So by proxy, them trying to express it is actually a useless exercise, because they don't even know what they're feeling to be able to put it into words. So that's where I'm like, I'm looking at all this garbage art. I don't even want to call it art. It's just garbage.
It's excessive design. Or no, it's a self-masturbatory design.
I'm talking about NFT.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but it's not even self-masturbatory design from what I'm thinking, in that they're basically taking aesthetic pieces and just throwing them together, and then being like, this is new and novel, therefore it's rare and it's valuable, and that. It's a valid approach in a speculative market, but that's how art becomes purely commercialized. And I think we're getting to a point where the commercialization of art is like actually making it impossible for the sake of art to actually occur, which is the grand irony of what they're trying to propose as the reason for monetization.
I think that art for the sake of art can still exist, but we're not going to find those people because they're not consumed with the internet.
Yeah.
And they're not trying to be a part of social media, and they're not trying to they're not constantly updating their followers. They don't even know what Instagram is.
Have you heard of Isaac Paleo?
I have not.
I think that's how you say it. I'm not exactly sure. Have you heard of West Side Gun and Griselda Records?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so there's this like underground. I still consider them underground, even though like famous people talk about them. But Griselda Records is like one of the more recent and more prominent underground hip hop labels, and what they have become synonymous with is these high art graffiti collaboration like outputs, where it's like you might take some historical painting, and then they'll put like a gold chain around the figure or some shit, and have like the artist who's releasing the record have their picture on the medallion and the gold chain. So it's like the Isaac Palaio's artwork is taking the old and mixing it with the new. Or he might take like the Mona Lisa and spray paint a smiley face over it. It's not always the same type of abstract. Or like one of the, like, they do really grimy shit. So then he'll have like just not positive figures, but then they'll paint a third eye on them. So it's like, what are they trying to say? So it's like, it makes you wonder what the artist is trying to say without the artist exactly spelling it out. So it gives some room for interpretation. But if anybody didn't have a simple understanding of abstract art, they would just look at it and be like, oh, this is a monster. That's part of it. Yeah, this thing is a monster. That's part of it, but this thing is also human. That's part of it.
I wonder how many people still exist within a framework of they like it or not, and don't get to experience the spectrum of emotions that artwork can elicit.
Yeah. And it has to be very binary, and that's kind of where, like, I think there is a type of person that is incapable of going beyond the surface level for whatever reason, and if that's because of nature or nurture, I don't know. But like, I tried to figure out what my thing is that kept me going, and it's like, I can't tell if it's nature or nurture or a combination, but I see a lot of people who think they can stop learning if they ever actually started learning. And it's like, I can't even understand or fathom that mindset, but it's a lot more common than I would anticipate, because that's not how I think.
Hold on, man. You just introduced a whole new concept into How can someone? I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of somebody who is so profoundly certain with their existence that they can just. That's it, and like, are they not creating new memories? That's like impossible. You can't not create unless you're have like brain damage.
Unless you get wrapped up in high school. High school becomes the point that everybody goes back to, and they never grow beyond that.
Like it's some kind of neurological trauma that they're stuck and they can't.
And it's not even just the trauma so much as it's like encouraged down to like how much of media that is for adults is like about teenagers in high school. Like Euphoria, this thing everybody's obsessed with right now, it's about high schoolers. Like fucking Zendaya's an adult. She's not a high schooler. Why are we having her portray a high schooler? You know what I mean? But then adults are like the ones eating it up. I don't see teenagers tweeting about Euphoria. This is adults who are stuck in fucking their high school trauma or their high school unfulfilled fantasy or whatever. Like, there is something that America romanticizes high school, and the people by proxy get emotionally and intellectually stuck. Al Bundy was like the like paragon of that.
Oh yeah. I imagine that that a lot of people never actually go out and do anything.
Right. I
so
mean,
like if one never goes and does anything, then sure, the peak of existence would have been sometime in high school when you were around the largest social crowd that you could have been around.
I think it's something like 66% of Americans never leave the country, and then something like 33% of Americans never leave their state. And then if you get down to like town and city, there's probably like 10% that never leave their town or city. I don't know that specific one, but I remember the last time I looked, it was like...
I've traveled internationally, but I still live in the town that I went to high school in, but it's not the town or even state that I was born in or the one that I went to most of elementary school in.
Yeah. Americans, but then Americans think they know about the world, and that's like the biggest lie that Americans have told themselves is that their understandings are representative of a whole, and that they're not being censored or have their information like propagandized. Like, I was watching, I mean, it's almost, okay, everything is either an advertisement or propaganda anymore, but it feels like those two things have become the core around which other things are built. So it's like the way that the native advertisements and the commercials and the narrative structures go, it's like, okay, we have this propaganda or this advertisement that we want to put out. What video can we make to get people to watch the propaganda? And that's what I feel around, like, even like every mixed martial arts event is now just propaganda that happens to have some fights.
How much of the media itself is actually genuine about its own content and is not just a commercial for a larger product or product ecosystem?
Public access.
So PBS.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much PBS is the only one. And even then, they have to like fundraise for themselves. So,
well, it's funny about that is that only, I think their fundraising keeps them in a financial zone that allows them to file as a nonprofit organization or a non-government organization or something like that. I think they're officially an NGO because they operate globally, but I think something like 90% of their funding actually comes from private entities, like contributions from the something endowment or the something or other fund.
Right. Yeah, because it's like they tried to like make the government stop funding them a few years ago.
Yeah, the government.
It's like 5%.
Yeah. And so it's like, please don't take away our government funding. Well, we want it. I think they do it because they want access, so they can have their reporters in the room to get their journalists access to those places. I think that's the real reason.
Well, and the issue is like the public access national mandate is something that was basically a counterpoint to corporate television. So if they start becoming corporate, then it undermines what the point of PBS was in the first place.
There's a group of very, not investors, contributors, benefactors or whatever. Benefactors. And they're like, their thing, that's where PBS comes from. So it's interesting. Like, I think it's public broadcast service because the taxpayer, you, I, everyone else, we pay for the contributions from the government to PBS so that their journalists can have access to the government so they can report to us. Yeah. So there's a weird feedback loop there.
Yep. Well, and I recall, I think my first encounter with anime was on public access, where people would run basically bootleg anime. And I think Fist of the North Star was like the first thing I saw where I'm like, this shit is wild. Because they didn't censor it either because it was public access. So I think for a brief window, you'd be able to watch not in every city because it was only,
it's localized.
Yeah. And I think it might even been from Bloomington that I was picking up. Well, I mean, I was in Indianapolis, but we could pick up like the Bloomington public access.
I think I remember that series.
There was like a dude with the glasses and a ponytail.
Yeah. Like
a nerdy looking motherfucker who would always play. And it was kind of like
it was like VHS square body screen copies. Like I think that they were actually just playing stuff that was at Plan 9 from Outer Space, the video place that was in the lower floor or the basement of that building on the square.
Yeah, I think, and then because they would do like weird production effects on the interludes, and it was kind of like they weren't doing commentary over it like Mystery Science, but they were doing like skits between like episode or between movies or whatever they were running.
I bet that's just so they can like fill out the time because they're playing like 19 to 21 minute animes, and they've got so that's 42 minutes. They've got an hour of time to fill. They've got to do something. Yeah. They might be able to find some real short, 10-minute anime or a slightly long 29-minute anime.
Yeah.
That stuff was always crazy. I remember, so when I was like, I think like 11 or 12, 13, 14, that range, too young to go hang out with friends late, but old enough that I was staying up and watching TV. There was one show that came on really late. It was like Jay and Beyond the Rocks. It was these two dudes who made mixed drinks and talked about.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
They talked about making mixed drinks. It was incredible. Like,
yeah, I totally remember that.
They would talk about different beer. They would talk about different types of alcohol. They talk about how to blend all of these things together.
And they would get trashed.
Oh, they would
be trashed. Because I remember being like, how is this legal? These dudes were fucking trashed on there.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Because they started out pretty normal, but
by the end,
it didn't take long either.
Whew. Well, they weren't acting.
No. Well, they were mixing 4 shots of something into something else and then drinking the whole thing relatively quickly.
Yeah.
And they weren't playing around.
No. Yeah, that's back in the day when you could just, I mean, I guess technically that's what YouTube is now, but.
I wonder how many of those videos on YouTube, the person is just, out of their gourd. Probably not that many. I bet it's
no, and I think a lot of them that are pretending, because there was I forget the fucker's name. This dude used to eat like anything, and he would eat like shoes or.
A buddy of mine had a YouTube series. Is it I'll Smoke Anything, but it was about meat. It was about smoking meats. He wasn't like rolling up
smoking in a pipe.
Yeah, he wasn't like twisting up a giant shoe doobie or stuffing a pipe full of underwear. He was taking like pieces of meat and putting them in the smoker and, you know, following the suggestions. And you know, they looked good. The output looked good. Can't complain. I didn't try it, but it looked good. Sometimes I think that's like half of what cooking is anyways, is just making it look good.
I mean, presentation is definitely one of the aspects of what makes something gourmet.
I think Japanese food is like 90% presentation. And I'm not saying that it's not good, but a lot of it is really hardcore presentation.
Right, you have to have like all the colors of the spectrum and
shit.
You know, it's like you don't have that type of range in American cooking.
Like their 10% is still probably equivalent to like, you know, maybe 70 or 80% of, you know, average cuisine across the globe, like across the cultures. But like the presentation of Japanese food is so amazing to me.
Well, and that's where I learned, you know, just to look at the colors of stuff, because you see most American food is like brown or brown and yellow. And like a very unnatural looking yellow where you're like, I don't know if I should be ingesting this. Like, I'm not doing...
So in Chinese food, like green vegetables are still green.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that there's a tendency with like casseroles and Western cuisine where vegetables end up going beyond green.
Oh yeah, they
get like overcooked.
Yeah.
And so I love it when I watch somebody stir fry something and they don't like destroy what they're making, but
yeah, Western stuff. I mean, again, it's like all meat most of the time. Very, very few Western dishes that are like American incorporate vegetables in a way that's not just like, oh, I'm gonna put like a parsley leaf on the plate.
A slab of meat, a slab of vegetable, pile of potato, gravy.
Yep. Pretty American.
Sliver or disc of cranberry sauce. That's like Thanksgiving, right?
That's fruit.
Right? A disc of cranberry sauce is, I just described Thanksgiving. Wait, bread, there's a roll and some butter. There's loads of butter in the whole thing anyways, but when I think of Thanksgiving meals, it's still overwhelmingly orange and brown. The potatoes are the lightest thing.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out at any given day what Americans are not eating chicken nuggets. Is it like 10%? 20? Is this where I'm like, I want to say chicken nuggets, French fries, and hamburgers are going to be 90% of American meals.
Man, so because of pandemic life, getting a hamburger at a fast food place is actually kind of a unique and almost special occasion for me because I'd never eat anything that has that much seasoning salt on it. And so I take that first bite and it's like, whoa, oh, wow. And then everything is kind of like normalized and all of a sudden the fries taste like potato instead of salt. And I can appreciate that weird texture, but then I go home and everything's bland, like the rest of the night.
Yeah, it's like fast food isn't even fast anymore. And that's where capitalism can't even keep fast food fast. I went to fucking Wendy's the other day, and I was sitting in line, and I'm like, I'm not sitting in line for this, so I just left. And it was like a realization, because it wasn't even lunch hour or anything, and I'm just like, at what point did these things that were meant to become fast shift into like, oh, you're gonna have to wait a bit, but it's not gourmet.
Like in the time that it took you to leave, get to Wendy's, and drive back, wait in line, decided that you weren't going to wait in line, and drive back, you could have made lunch and then gotten back to whatever you're doing, right?
And that's what ended up happening is like I went home and we ended up making lunch, and it was probably just as quick as me sitting in that line and waiting for somebody who doesn't care about my food to make something just because they're getting paid like $10 an hour if they're lucky. So that's where I'm like, man, I care about my food when I eat it, but there's nobody who's gonna get paid enough to actually care about that food anywhere remotely close to me. So it becomes more and more difficult to go down the like pay for food route, because I'm just like, whoever made this does not give a fuck, and that's why you end up with like shells in your eggs, because if they crack the egg, if you're lucky enough to have a fresh egg, if they get a little bit of shell, they're not gonna fucking take it out like you will at home. Anytime I get a shell in my egg at home, I'm gonna make sure I pull it out because I don't want to crunch on it, and that's where
that's such a horrible feeling too.
Oh yeah.
Well, most people just take a whisk and destroy the egg. Anyways, they don't fold it into itself. There's no intent or intentional behavior in whisking other than destroying it so it's scrambled, which in a sense is pre-cooking it because it's breaking down protein bonds already.
Yeah, which you're not supposed to do when you scramble. Like
you're supposed to fold the egg.
You're supposed to slowly whisk as you cook it, and it's like obviously a little bit beforehand, but not like beat it to death.
No, you fold it into itself a few times, like 50 times, but that's still not beating it.
Yeah,
you can do that with a fork instead of a whisk, and then you can have this really velvety, thick, almost like taffy, thick egg, and then it expands as it curdles. Low heat, everybody. It'll take as long as it takes to cook bacon.
I mean, and if you had, because I've seen, it don't have to necessarily be completely low, but medium, like Gordon Ramsay's recipe, it takes like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like it's not on high, it's on medium, and that's where you have to get the pan hot though, and that's where getting the shit hot beforehand makes cooking more in line with the way it's supposed to be, rather than trying to like heat up the pan with the eggs in the pan already.
Oh yeah, that doesn't work.
I mean, it's just really slow because there's eggs constantly absorbing the heat, and it like just takes longer for the pan to like it takes longer for the pan to heat up, and by proxy longer for the eggs to heat up because they're constantly losing the heat. And that's like, whether it's like cooking eggs or cooking a steak, heating the pan up beforehand is just such a huge part of like making the process the way it's supposed to be, in line with the actual recipe. Even down to like, I very rarely actually use heavy cream with eggs, but that's where if you want the fluffiest eggs, it's like you should go with heavy cream.
I wouldn't even put cream in. There's just extra stuff to have to cook. For the fluffiest eggs that I make some real thick, like big curdle eggs. It just takes a while, but you definitely have to start with the right heat. The egg starts to cook at like 110 to 112 degrees, depending on how well you fold it into itself. And so once you get at that point, if you can stabilize that. So this is one of those places where I think induction cooking actually might be vastly superior, because they're able to maintain temperature better than anything. I mean, a big flame, a big high BTU flame will obviously heat something up really quickly. But I think it's still not temperature stable like induction theoretically could be if you had, the fanciest induction range possible.
I mean, it was creme fraiche she used, not heavy cream, actually. But induction, like...
So if you can maintain the right temperature, then it would almost cook itself.
I've seen that type of cooking, and it works really well, but the person doing it has to also, like, season it. And that's the big issue, is a lot of times they don't fucking season it correctly.
Yeah. I think that's one of those things where it's like, I wonder if there's a way to make it so it's extremely temperature stable, but not like dangerous levels of electromagnetism. Mm-hmm. Because I think that every induction plate that I've seen or range, they basically just plug into the wall, and I know that's a lot of electricity, but they all do it. You throw something into the pan and it'll lose temperature. And I don't know if that's like a limitation of the cookware or the induction system itself. But I've seen some really cool ones. I've seen some induction woks, and at first I was not a believer. But then I watched a video where this person just puts a bunch of oil in their induction wok, and it's got a dish that the whole thing sits in, and it's round on the bottom. It's very cool. And turns it on and just turns it up, and the thing just starts boiling like almost instantly. And I thought, like, holy crap, that's incredible. And turns it off, and the thing stayed hot for a little while because oil retains its heat rate pretty efficiently. But it was very impressive. I'd never seen anything like that before. This is in the last 6 months. I still haven't seen anything like that. That's one of those things I'm pretty proud of YouTube for delivering to me.
Yeah. Whenever they do breakfast at the tutor room, they use one to cook them real fast, like the omelets, and it's like...
You're instantaneous.
Yeah, it's like 20, I mean, not even 20 seconds really, but it's pretty sweet how fast that shit happens.
See, I think that's the kind of thing, once we program a machine to automate that process, then you can you select your omelet and you select your ingredients, and it throws the thing in there, it spits the ingredients on there, it flips a panel, it does another pass through the induction conveyor belt, and then on the other end it just flips it out onto a plate and drops some fruit out next to it.
Yeah, so Master P made a automated ice cream machine where you put your type of ice cream, the ingredients, and then the size. Damn, this dude's on some different shit.
He's taking it to a whole new level. He's real serious about the ice cream.
Yeah, he's got an ice cream machine in his house now. I guess technically it's frozen yogurt, but
Froger's still good.
Yeah, I mean it might be ice cream, but it looks it may be soft serve, but it looked like. The way that those make your own soda machines work, it was basically that, but with ice cream.
I love those things.
Yeah.
Those are the best. Whenever I end up, well, it's only been a few times, and actually recently because I went to Texas, but when I see those multi-vendor soda machines, I get really excited because I get to make really crazy blends like cherry, peach, Sprite, orange Sprite, and give it a little lime. It's basically a Five Alive soda.
Yeah.
Sometimes, add some Gatorade at the end, or Powerade, or whichever one it is. I think it's Powerade. Add the Powerade at the end to give it a little blast of purple. It turns out looking pretty much like Coca-Cola, but it tastes like fruit punch, but it's not like the actual fruit punch.
Yeah, it's
actual fruit punch tastes so it's too sweet.
It's hard to be judicious with those because if you mix too many, then it just kind of all end up tasting like syrup.
Yeah, you can only give it like a little blast of everything.
Yeah.
And you can't overdo it because then it doesn't taste like anything.
Yeah.
Just sugar.
Yeah, we used to do that shit as kids because we had the like soda machine where you could get, select your own at lunch. And then it's like, I got to a point where I would do like half orange soda, half Coca-Cola or something something stupid where it's like
Orange Coke.
Yeah. I don't even know why, but
I like orange soda on its own.
Root beer and Coke. I ended up, I would always only mix two towards the end, but that's where after a while I'm like, it doesn't even really taste like anything.
Orange Slice. Orange Slice and Mountain Dew work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's actually a decent combination because I'm still not sure what Mountain Dew is supposed to taste like.
The dew of a mountain?
It's supposed to be a citrus drink, but I'm not sure what citrus fruits grow in Appalachia.
Yeah, Mountain Dew's one of those weird... you enjoy it when you're a kid, and then one day you wake up and realize it's like burning everything. You're like, what am I just drinking acid?
It's the same color as antifreeze.
You can feel your teeth rotting in real time.
I can feel my teeth rotting just thinking about Mountain Dew.
It's real bad. There's a whole lot of sugar. I mean,
it looks radioactive. It looks like the same color as glow stick juice that doesn't glow.
Well, it's funny. Okay, I don't know if you apparently have a comment in the chat box. I don't know if you can see it.
I can't. Probably can't.
But I don't know if you remember when like neon emerged as like a new set of colors. But Mountain Dew to me feels like one of those unnatural flavors that emerges where it's like, oh, this is cool because it's new, and then you wake up and realize like, oh, my mouth has been rotting off, and then you're like, oh no, I need to stop.
So that's what Pop Rocks does.
Yeah.
Like Pop Rocks, Lick'em-Aid, that powder stick candy thing that most people just end up dumping the powder bag in their mouth and then tossing the Lick'em-Aid. It's
yeah. They put
they had the two sugar dipping sticks and the 3 pouches of flavor and like. I think most people... I was
always like sketched about those. I never did those, but
I knew people would just like throw away the sugar dipping sticks and then just down the bag of flavoring.
It always reminded me of like ants. That's what I'm like. That ant DNA must be strong coming up. If that person is just like, I need sugar, just like.
I loved those things as a kid, and when I look at it now, it's like, man.
No, I mean, and there's nothing wrong. I love ants. Don't get me wrong. Ants are cool
like
as fuck.
they were. I remember that stuff burning my tongue and like not being able to taste anything for like the next day. And at some point, I stopped craving them because I've had enough sugar. I don't need more sugar. Fuck, give me some water.
Well, I mean, and I don't mean to make that sound like I'm denigrating the insect DNA. That we all have various insect DNA, because then you see like the moth shit come through strong, and we're like, I have no idea why I'm fucking looking at this feed or the CNN page right now, but that's the moth coming through. It's like needing that flicker, that light flicker, and it's like we want to tell ourselves it's because we're looking at this one specific article, but it's like, no, I just need that fucking 65 hertz fucking light flicker. I'll say I'm reading an article. But people don't want to acknowledge that shit.
Man, when I just need when I just want transitions of lights, I just turn it off the computers and stare at the ceiling where there's nothing to look at and let the tranquility lighting just modulate. That's like as close as I can get to being out in the middle of nowhere where there is no technology. Which is really weird because I'm relying on specific technology to do that, like an enclosed environment where the lighting itself is essentially controlled. It's a very different experience, though. It's not. It's like an unnatural version of like stillness of mind.
Sorry.
Oh man. And I remember reading about people like or research being conducted on lucid dreaming and how they were trying to stimulate lucid dreaming with people wearing these like masks with lights on them. I can't even sleep with the flicker of the router in the other room. Fuck having a LED right in front of my eyeballs. Shit, that would I'd wake up and be like, what the fuck?
That's crazy.
Like
well, even then, like, I know it's almost like I need photons to activate my dreams. Not that I wouldn't dream without them, but I feel like I can even, okay, I'm sure most people can tell when the light is on with their eyes closed because it like makes your eyelids glow and you can see the light versus when it's dark. So I think there's something to this, like, okay, alligators, I forget if it's alligators or crocodiles, they have like an extra slit that they can put over their eyelid or over their eye to like
I think that's
allow them to see without having to like completely cover up their eye.
I think iguanas do that too.
There's a few animals, so it's not just like, it's like amphibious creatures often have them, I think, because it allows them to then
word.
see better underwater without having to sacrifice visibility while also protecting it. So it's like this.
They have built-in goggles.
Basically. And that's kind of where the whole point is. I imagine, obviously, the eyelid serves in some purpose to keep the eye wet and from drying out over time, but I think there's like this is crazy. The eyelids are basically the screen refresh for the brain. And if anything, blinking allows us to like clear the cache.
Yeah, there's always like a cached bitmap of things that are stable in a localized perspective.
And blinking like helps that like gives you a second to like clear it. So there's something to that where obviously there's multiple purposes, or when there's I think
we have a much higher refresh rate, but this just clears the cache of stable objects as we change perspectives, and like so as there's a microphone in front of me and the background behind you is relatively stable, as I move my chair around, the microphone does shift in front of me because of parallax.
Exactly.
So
you have to choose which eye to focus.
Yep.
Or if you can use both, like where to focus,
and
to
so there
choose
are
which frame.
Exactly. And so there are subtle
field.
shifts in the background because of the relative motion of my head. And so there are some changes to the cache, but not that many.
But it's what's most important right now, effectively. In the foreground and in the background, what's most dangerous right now, constantly. Yeah. So allowing those things to shut down for sleep, I think, is one of the biggest actual elements of it's not just eyelids, but that's one of the things that they do for perception, because then it's like the ears don't have that capacity, but they tune things out that aren't dangerous.
I wonder how a attenuated our senses of like electrical fields really are. Like if we were to expose a human from 200,000 years ago to modern electrical fields, would they be aware of that?
Oh, I'm sure because they wouldn't have had any exposure to that. So it's like completely, in the sense of like, you know when a TV's on.
Yeah.
You can tell because you can hear it.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it'd be
There's that
10
real
times as
high-pitched
strong
whine.
because they've never heard that whine before.
Yeah. Could that person, do you think that person could live next to a road, like a heavily trafficked road, without being just anxious all the time?
Well, like,
they probably
I
wouldn't.
think, like, you just made me realize it probably would be something that, like, drove them crazy because they hadn't become desensitized to it. So then, like, there's documented proof that living next to electrical stations causes some sort of increase of risk of types of cancer. It may not be because of the radiation. It may be because they're constantly exposed to this fucking hum and they never get silence. So that's where I think like 3 a.m. I always thought of it as like my favorite time for whatever reason, but I think it's just because it's the most silent. Like everybody's mostly asleep. You're not getting any sort of like background noise from the cars driving by, fucking people's like ambient thought and their ambient movement from their fucking thought. None of that's happening.
There isn't a microwave being turned, cycling across the street.
No, you can hear everything in the local because there's nothing happening, which is why when you're up at that time, it feels surreal, but it's because it's like the most clear thinking time of the day. And I think that's where like people have said that for a very long time, even before the internet. So I don't. It's not just 3 a.m. It's like the time
isn't
when everybody's
3 a.m.
asleep.
like the witching hour?
Basically.
Yeah.
And that's where culturally we've turned it into hours that we need to sleep so we can dedicate ourselves to our work cycle. When historically that hours have been associated with creative cycles and being able to tap into a creative energy that is usually inaccessible because of the noise. So that's where it's like, you don't have to be a creator to enjoy it necessarily, but if someone's like ever been creating at 3 a.m., they know exactly what I'm talking about because it's different than creating at 3 p.m. And it's not just because it's dark, because creating at 7 p.m. Or 9 p.m. is like when you're creating at 9 p.m., you know people are doing things, and it becomes not disorienting so much as it causes anxiety to make you feel like you're missing out on something because people are doing things because you can hear it happening. It's still audibly occurring. Like you may have, like right now, there's so many cars happening, like driving by where it's like, well, is there a fucking event downtown? What's going on? Is there a football game? What's happening? I don't know. Something's happening today because there's a bunch of traffic.
Yeah, it's actually been pretty light traffic. I haven't heard.
I mean, I'm just saying.
No,
like,
I know, but like in terms of like what you just referenced, like we haven't heard any emergency vehicles yet.
No, that's true.
And normally there's at least one.
Yeah. Well, because people usually speed through here, and you can tell they're not speeding as much.
Yeah.
Like because of the potential for ice.
Well, it's cold out. It's sufficiently cold that tires don't grip the road like they're supposed to. They don't. They're below the threshold for secure mechanical adhesion to the road. It's a property of the physical property of the tire itself that is the limiting factor. And it's like all season tires really aren't all season. They're really only good to like 40 degrees, and they might be made for like the kind of road compounds that we have here, the rubber compounds. But it's tough because the weather doesn't care. The weather doesn't care what tires anyone has. It's gonna change its mind, and at some point it's going to be 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and at some point it's going to be cold enough that someone's car isn't going to start that morning, and there's going to be a host of issues because it'll be that cold. But then a couple of weeks later it'll be nice and warm, and then everything's kind of back to normal. But it's during those like extra cold periods that I always worry. At least here, there's the people seem to crest this hill going like anywhere from 40 to 60 miles an hour. And like you were saying, 3 a.m. it's the quietest. It's when you hear everything.
So Anthony Kidd said, "If it looks good, maybe it is," and he was fast disappointed. I'm not exactly sure what that was in reference to because I just pulled it up. So it was I'm a little late because I did not have access to the chat box at first, but I'll keep this open now, so if anything happens again, I won't be this late.
What is this on the
the Randos chat box?
Yeah. Anthony is he's one of the other station contributors at KLST. He runs FL4L on Saturday night. I guess it's from like Saturday at midnight in Pacific Northwest through noon here whenever I pick up. He's got actually a pretty good show. There's a bunch of it that's some of it is way out there, and I come in at the middle of some dialogue and I'm not sure what's going on. and then there'll be like a selection of music for some extended period of time, and he's got good taste in music. Whenever I listen, it's like, oh, I've never heard any of this. Shazam, tell me what this is. And Shazam says, this is something by blah blah blah. And it's like, that's fucking cool.
Yeah, fucking. Anytime I tune into Callisti, it's usually good. I'm like, if it's not something I'm going to listen to, it's not because it's bad. It's because it's not my type of music necessarily.
Yeah.
And that's where I don't really ever hear bad. I mean, I don't know if his show necessarily plays music, but I'm just saying in the sense of
the station as a whole is pretty well managed. This guy Niza, he's down in Texas, and he's got it set up pretty well. It's pretty straightforward. Everything's pretty seamless.
Yeah, because I try. Okay, it's weird in the sense of when we were coming up musically, the thing that you would look for if you're trying to find something that's like completely underground is a white label record. And I don't know if that type of thing exists so much anymore, where the closest thing you can do is find like an internet radio station and find a DJ and have a DJ that you like their style, and that's like the closest thing I think we can get to looking for those white label experiences anymore. Because I don't, if you didn't ever buy a white label vinyl album, like I don't think you could really understand what that shit was like, in the sense of you don't know who made it a lot of time. Like before people started actually putting their names on the remixes, you wouldn't know who fucking made the song, and it was like this thing for them to do to get around copyright infringement in certain cases, but other times it was just to like go along with the scene's mystery. And the process of making vinyl albums is like you go get it pressed and then you go sell it. So if somebody's not gonna create like a label that's specific to that, then it's just gonna be a white label.
There's a variation of the white label. It's the acetate, and it's what can be cut directly from a recording onto an acetate. An acetate is then they mold it and then create the dyes, and then you throw a wad of like however many, like 240 grams of vinyl, and smash it in there, trim it off, pull the thing out, and lo and behold, there's your vinyl. And but anyways, the acetate itself can still be played. So, but they don't have a very long shelf life. They maybe like 10 to 20 times, maybe, if you're real nice to them and you have a needle that's like gentle. If you got the balance set properly on your counterweight, it doesn't eat into it, but they don't have a very long life. But then after that, they take that, they peel out the vinyl and they trim it off and then ship that out. There are a few other steps. I think there's like chrome involved at some point. It's like crazy shit.
Interesting.
It's neat though. The whole process of like stamping out records, like once they make everything, you just take those and punch them out, like almost literally punch them out.
Mm-hmm.
Vinyl is so crazy to me too, because it's still there's this element of to it, like they're deriving stereo out of a single valley, and I know that both faces of the valley are not identical, and they do like a sum in the difference type of thing to derive the actual signals. But even then, vinyl has such a low signal to noise ratio compared to what's possible with digital, digital to analog systems. It's almost like the accuracy of a digital system is too great, and it's not, like, reality doesn't sound as good as we want it to sound.
Right.
And there's this like naturalizing effect that a record has that somehow makes it, also the process of mastering it for the medium itself, knowing that there are like preamps and re-emphasis curves involved. Like there's a whole process of making it fit into that kind of narrow dynamic range. I think that's part of it. It has to be. It's like unique to the medium. Tape has a similar quality of compressing the signal itself, but vinyl is accessible and tape is one of those things that's actually very fragile.
Well, and thinking about it, like, okay, the big difference between the analog and digital, the biggest difference, in fact, is that the media themselves have their own sound, and that if you play a cassette tape that doesn't have anything recorded on it, it's still going to make a sound. If you play a vinyl album that has lines but doesn't have any audio, it's still going to make a sound. But just playing an MP3 of nothing, it's just, there's no actual extra frequency that comes from the media. And I think that's where, on the one hand, the absence of a sound is its own addition to the pantheon of recording media, but vinyl, the more dust that it collects, the more pops it has on every record. And it's like the whole warmth and the dust pops that are part of the media are something that, like I said, if it's recording nothing, it's still gonna make a sound, whereas like an MP3 of no audio, unless the room makes a sound, and that's where eigentone recording or the bass frequency of any specific space, eigentone recording is a lot more accurate when it's digital, because then the analog medium is not adding its own sound into it. But then that's where I was really getting into recording silent spaces for a long, to see what the different eigentones would sound like. And there are
Did you go to where is there's an anechoic chamber in like Indianapolis. I think it's like Klipsch owns one.
No, I didn't go there, but those things are cool as fuck.
Oh, those are so weird. You can hear like your heartbeat, your lungs. You can hear like your stomach doing all sorts of weird stuff.
Yeah.
When you really move, crazy. You can hear all all your musculature like move. Ooh, it's so strange.
Yeah. But that's where, like, until, I think the best film and television have a lot of attention paid to the sounds of each room. But if you don't have a good audio system, you're not going to be able to perceive that shit anyway. So it's almost like you have to be in a theater or in a really nice audio setup for that stuff to end up being important, because it ends up getting like drowned out in the background noise, or the foreground noise in this case, that's like important, but it doesn't allow nuance of soundscapes. And that's where, on the one hand, everything is not meant to be that type of experience, but just as with the food palette, then everything becomes a very flat, oversaturated sound experience. That's where, like, it's yelling and fucking guns and explosions and, like, I have to, like, ride the remote control whenever I watch any sort of movie to like, get the right setting where I can hear the person, because they're either whispering, or I have to turn it down really fast because they're yelling. And if they start whispering, then a car crash or a fucking explosion's about to happen. So the pacing is such that the audio equalization then becomes stressful, because it's for this audience that doesn't have a nuanced palette.
What I always hated about The Matrix is that half the movie you have to have the volume all the way up to be able to hear what they're whispering, because they're always whispering. And then all of the action sequences, you pretty much have to turn it down all the way. Otherwise, you're just going to get, like, bombarded. You won't be able to sleep that night or hear anything for the next couple days.
See the movie Tenet?
Yeah, I have a lot of. I'm not gonna say bad things to say, but the protagonist is named fucking protagonist, for fuck's sake. That's the least creative thing that got praised for supposedly being creative, and it was like the visual and sonic experiences were decent, but I was very like...
That was that movie that happened forwards and backwards at the same time, right?
Yeah.
It was such a strange movie.
I mean, and it basically...
A temporal pincer movement.
For no reason either. For no reason. Just to undo itself. And that's kind of where I really despise when those types of MacGuffins are used for the sake of a story that doesn't actually have any larger meaning, that then pretends to be philosophical. Because, like, on the one hand, you would look at, like, the first 5 minutes of Tenet look like, oh shit, this is about to be some high philosophy shit. But really, it's like philosophical drag, in that to the point of really undermine, like, the end of the movie completely undermines itself. So then, not even giving the fucking protagonist a name, it's like, does this time loop even matter in the grand scheme of things? The fact that it exists and probably keeps happening over and over because it's a loop. So, does this even matter? In the grand scheme, no. So, you can't do philosophical drag without people who understand philosophy then coming out and being like, you're a bullshitter. You didn't actually say anything here. You just made it look like you said something. You didn't say anything of significance with this story. And it wasn't like the like capacity to tell a meaningless story forwards and backwards at the same time. We did that with Memento. We don't need another Memento. And it's like, it's just, I look at these stories where they don't actually make commentary, but they use these novel approaches to film to make it seem like it's some sort of philosophical masterpiece, like Pi. Pi is a garbage film. It's trash. It doesn't say anything useful. It uses very hard imagery to make it seem like it's doing something. It uses literal references to esotericism to make it seem like it's being esoteric. And at the end of the day, it's like, it's completely meaningless. So that's where it's not that I didn't get it. I'm just calling bullshit on stuff like that where
I had the best experience watching Pi. I saw a version of Pi that nobody else got to see. And,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So, you know how every time he gets close to deriving the meaning, or the solution, and his computer fries, and he's got to go get a better machine to compute whatever he's trying to compute, right? Mm-hmm. At the very end, he's computing the thing's about to spit it out, right? The film melts. And so the screen just goes and dissolves and lights turn on. And
it's a better ending.
It is a better ending.
It's a much better ending.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I've never seen it. So I don't even know how it ends any other way. That's the way that I saw.
Where'd you see that cut?
The Von Lee. It was like an accident. The film melted.
That's funny.
And so the Von Lee was this old theater that got turned into like a
That's funny.
oodles of noodles type place. You know, it's right next to People's Park in downtown Bloomington. And I was there with my dad. They ended up giving us free movie passes. He would just come back from the bathroom, I think, and the guy was like, "Hey," he's like, "Hey, I'm here with my kid," and so they gave him two, and I walked out, and I was like, "Hey, I was here with my dad," and so they gave me 2 tickets too, so we ended up with like 4 tickets to go see a movie at one of the local theaters, and yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the best ending.
That's much better.
That's the best version of Pi.
Because then the real ending is the dude gives himself a lobotomy to make it like. It looks like he kills himself, but he's actually just giving himself a lobotomy to make it so that he's not good at math anymore. So like the little girl at the beginning who like comes up and asks, she's always like, "What's blah 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 times blah blah blah?"
Yeah.
She comes up and asks him, he's like, I don't know. And he's like all happy about it. And that's how this shit ends. I'm like, man, fuck you.
Yeah, no, I saw the best version of that movie. The film melted. Cannot be replicated. It was like the Dada version of Pi.
It's Dadaist as fuck.
Everything else is just like some studio cut that was made by some hack.
Yeah.
The Dada cut, though, that's irreplicable.
I have no problem looking at stuff like that and being like, nope, that's just bad. That's garbage. That's philosophical drivel. And people will be like, oh, this movie's so intellectually perfect. No, fuck, it's not.
Well, I liked... I thought The Fountain was like that. I didn't think it was a very good movie, but it looked really cool.
Fountain, I haven't seen it.
It was...
Fountain. Was that a...
It's another Darren Aronofsky movie.
Yeah, Darren Aronofsky. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got Hugh Jackman and... Rachel Weisz and it's like a weird time travel story. It's dumb. It's
Aronofsky's one of the most overrated people of all time. I think his shit is just mostly garbage. That's like shocking visuals for the sake of being shocking.
I mean, visually it was stunning, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah,
about
visually it was cool, and they used the word shabalba a lot.
Shabalba. That's right.
Oh man, and that's what I'm like. I'm sure he's like a very intelligent, genius person, but I get his stuff. It's just not what people say it is, and those people who say it is just aren't as philosophically advanced as they think there are. Because that's kind of where like I see what they're trying to do, and they fail at it miserably.
No, it's the same. This is the same thing we're talking about with surrealist art. If they have to defend it, then it's art. It's not. It's something else.
You see, David Lynch does not like comment on his shit. Like He just refuses to answer shit a lot most of the time.
I think
He doesn't even stand. He doesn't even stand for recognition at the end of the films at the film festival. All he wants to do is go out and smoke a cigarette and get on to his next project.
He's
amazing.
like, my appearance here is obligatory.
Well, I was doing some research on him, and that's where I'm like, I can definitively say he makes stuff for the sake of making it, because if you look at like the movie Dune didn't make any money, fucking the Twin Peaks movie didn't make any money. Like I don't know if his other movies made any money because I didn't look, because I'm assuming there's a trend where he's not a blockbuster filmmaker, and that's not his goal.
Yeah. I think of him, he's like John Carpenter. He's underappreciated, like in the United States. But they make good movies.
Yeah.
They tell stories. I think that's the key. They tell stories about people, and the characters might not even be well defined, but the things that happen to them are enough. They tell just enough story to make it move and keep you engaged.
Yeah.
I like the more recent Twin Peaks seasons.
Yeah, I just finished them.
There's a new Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he progressed. It was broadcast through Showtime, I think.
Yeah, I think that was a wise decision.
Huh. I've completely missed the Twin Peaks. What is it, a revival?
That's exactly what it's called.
Twin Peaks Revival?
I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
I think it's The Return.
Oh, The Return.
The Return.
Yeah.
Well, Twin Peaks Revival would be, they can do that with the third
Return.
I knew in a sense it is a revival.
Yeah, that's what I'm like. I thought, yeah.
Well, they can call that the, whatever, the fourth iteration, or however many iterations they're on now.
It was the like third season, but they did a movie and a VR experience apparently, which I never
Experience
sure
Twin Peaks in virtual reality.
Yeah,
I like David Lynch's commentary on making quinoa. Have you ever seen that?
no.
He basically talks some colleagues of his, or like film students or groupies or whatever, through like his process of making quinoa, like why he likes quinoa and how much water to use, and it's this black and white thing, and he's just smoking a cigarette making quinoa. And he just uses the word quinoa several times, and the way he says it, in that
Quinoa.
Yeah,
You take 1 cup of quinoa, you add 1 cup of water, and then you boil it, and you let it sit,
and then you
wash
take
it,
your quinoa
and add the quinoa, and you take your spices, and you put them together.
Ah, man, quinoa.
Yeah. Quinoa.
Poor farmers in the countries
Yeah,
that produce it
says
can't
it
even
like
afford
that,
it
yeah.
anymore.
Quinoa. Because then I was watching this video, he calls Kyle MacLachlan Kale. He calls him Kale. And he
calls him Kale because
Kale.
Dino De Laurentiis called him Kale.
So he kept calling him Kale from that day forward. And he calls the other Madgekin is what he calls her.
Madgekin.
And she's like, that's not my name. I'm going to call you Madgekin anyway. That's what I'm going to call you.
Oh, dear.
I saw some behind the scenes footage of them filming the Return, Twin Peaks, The Return. And it was like in between shots, and David Lynch was like putting some sort of food, like a pancake of some kind, or maybe it was some sort of substance, but it was like putty or something on Naomi Watts' face. And he was just like telling her to stay like that while she was in full costume in front of all the cameras. And then like he took it off of her face. And then like you could hear him tell her that he loved her from behind the camera. And then she was like, I love you too. And then they continued with filming.
Yeah. I guess they did a lot of the he does his interviews of the people in character in some of the behind the scenes stuff.
Oh, really?
So does Twin Peaks become Silent Hill when everyone takes acid, or when they put acid in the water or something like that? I mean, like,
it would be the opposite, right? Because Silent Hill was afterwards.
Silent Hill's after the acid water.
I mean, Silent Hill came after, like, chronologically.
Yeah.
I think it was like, wasn't that like 95 or something? Or maybe it was a little later than that.
No, I mean, like, but like from like Twin Peaks is a story about a town and all the stuff that goes on in it.
Twin Peaks, Washington,
and all the weird stuff that happens there.
Yeah,
But like, and so it was like a story mechanism. Then like, what do we have like story wise where it's about a town? I'm just trying to
Amityville Horror.
Amityville, yeah,
that was like before that even.
Yeah. So there's like a tradition of towns that like consume
Evil
people.
Towns, yeah. Gotham, I think, was even written that way before Twin Peaks. Like, I forget who started it, but I know it's been like that for a long time. Like
writing about the town as a character. It's
like a living
entity
that poisons people.
Yeah. Where does that start?
I feel like it would. It might have been Grant Morrison, which would have been like late '80s then. Because
I feel like it goes back. That kind of idea though goes back way farther. Like,
oh yeah.
Like in terms of like plague times, dark ages. Like I'm sure like there are myths of like whole villages that consume its inhabitants or something like that. Curses. Evil forces, ways to explain death. I mean, I think it's cross-cultural. Like,
I think there's a place in Arizona, like Black Rock, or some Grand Mesa or some shit, like that has like a lore associated with it. That's like that, where it's meant to be.
Don't go here because you'll die.
Right. Like. There's like a powerful negative force that resides there, so you're not supposed to go there. And it's like, that shit definitely isn't new, isn't from like Twin Peaks or something.
Yeah.
Because it's not always positive types of shit, and that's kind of, I think, what those lore, like, people have heard of, I mean, not people, esotericists have heard of the ley lines and what they're supposed to represent, and with people who study like Gaia theory and shit like that.
And somehow they line up with like, the transmercator system that we use to outline coordinates on the Earth.
Just happen to be.
Just happen to line up with them.
But then you look at where like, okay. You look at how cities are mapped out, and then it lines up with them, but it's because the cities are aligned with north and south, so it's kind of happening naturally. So it's like, people are fucking stupid because they can't extrapolate, and it's like, well, the Freemasons have a keystone at the bottom of each building, and it's like, well, yeah, because they the ones who built it.
So I was reading
it's like
about.
Signature.
I was reading about lightning this morning, and lightning strikes are fairly common all over the planet. It's terrestrial electrical discharge.
Yeah.
There's also this phenomenon, and they were calling it like dark lightning or black lightning. It's a trans gamma emission. And so this happens like 1 out of 1,000 lightning discharges, either terrestrial or atmospheric lightning discharge. There will be a terrestrial gamma emission from our planet. And so, that means that the electrical activity itself of our planet, like our electromagnetic activity in our atmosphere and all that stuff, it's also relative to this whatever activity inside of our planet is generating gamma emissions, and it's not enough to kill us. It's not enough to. That might actually be the thing that gives people cancer.
So like underground lightning.
There's some thing in the planet that's moving around that contributes to gamma emissions from the surface of our planet out into space, but most of them are diffused by our atmosphere on the way out, so they don't go anywhere. They're not going to kill us. They're not that strong, but they're enough to create like a peak signature when they're taking emissions from satellites of lightning storms. And it's coming from the Earth.
That's wild. Must be a big ass lightning bolt.
But we can't see it because it's in the gamma spectrum.
Right.
So
imagine being able to see
about
that
all
shit.
these? What about all these digging projects that we have all over the world? Like, are we just exposing ourselves to even more gamma radiation from?
well, I think if that's a place where there's like a heightened probability of terrestrial gamma emissions like from that location, then yeah, that probably wouldn't be a good idea because that's ionizing radiation. It destroys organic tissue.
I wonder if that's part of the surveying process when
I doubt it.
oil rigs are going down or.
Yeah, I doubt it.
I doubt it. They just discovered these things, so it's one of those things where in the write-up they describe being fortunate enough to have enough satellites over a lightning storm as it was happening, and then they noticed this certain peak within the electromagnetic spectrum that they were able to visualize based upon radio spectroscopy. When they use two radios. Yeah, that's it. And they use two radios to create a three-dimensional map.
Then there's ball lightning. Question of whether or not ball lightning actually exists.
I don't think it's a question of whether it exists so much as what's causing it when it occurs, and like if it's a naturally occurring phenomenon on its own or like the byproduct of other things that then produce an effect that looks like. Because that's where I'm like, I think there's enough documented proof that it exists, but obviously there's not enough data to know what it is, and that's where it's like, because it has been identified as a specific phenomenon, like, I don't think there's necessarily any question of like ball lightning occurring, because I think it can even be reproduced using like plasma fields and like directed frequency manipulation. So it's like, I think it can be reproduced at this point. So I don't think that it's like a problem of it existing. It's just a matter of the thing that may be causing it to occur could be like a byproduct of some shit that we're doing that we don't know, like having too many above ground power lines along water sources or something. There may be something that like we're doing that is indirectly or directly causing it that we just haven't figured out.
A primordial black hole is transiting our sun, and during a solar flare, and it's or a solar storm, and it's directing a sufficient amount of solar radiation into a space that excites our atmosphere and makes it go crazy for a brief second because it has primordial black hole gravitational lensing. That's the really far out, not likely scenario, but that could happen too.
Yeah, it could happen. That's where...
It could happen at night when we wouldn't even... No, it would happen during the day.
There's just so much shit about being constantly bombarded by cosmic particles that, like, we get the northern lights in Indiana sometimes, and it's like, because we're getting bombarded with a solar flare so far south that, if it happens at night, then we'll see I guess technically it's still the aurora borealis, like, but I've definitely seen them sometimes.
Yeah,
where,
they kind of are like extra orange.
yeah, it's really crazy.
It's green up at the top because of like our atmosphere and the wavelength of the prismatic effect of our atmosphere.
Yeah, it's really weird. It's like I could see how people would then be like, "Is this a simulation?" Because it kind of looks like the sky is like glitching out or some shit. Somebody's tapping the fucking screen.
It doesn't move. It doesn't even look like it does in pictures. Most pictures are like an extended exposure, and then in a lot of videos they just do like pixel stacking, and then they do some like time lapse or hyperlapse so that it makes it look like it's moving or has some kind of activity. It's a lot fainter than that in real life. It's one of those things like you have to turn off all your lights to really appreciate. There's actually a dark sky location in, I think there's actually several in Indiana. There's like 2 or 3 dark sky locations where there is no light pollution for 50 miles in any direction. And these are places where you can see everything. You can see the Milky Way. And on the right night, you can see away from the Milky Way, which is really weird, like the darkest nights.
Yeah.
Those are actually the coolest nights because there's just nothing happening.
Well, and then it's on those types of nights that you're like, oh yeah, I can see how somebody with no telescope could start mapping these things, like because you can see shit super clear.
Oh yeah, you can see colors that just don't exist. I remember maybe it was well over a decade ago. There was a documentary about the percentage of kids who grew up in cities having never seen the sky at night because there's so much light pollution.
That's crazy. And
it was something that was kind of alarming then. It was probably something crazy like 40% of kids had never seen the sky, but I bet it's a lot higher now.
Yeah.
There's also a high percentage of kids who've never seen like squirrels or wildlife of any kind because they've grown up in the city.
I've seen city squirrels. Some of those fucking things are huge.
Yeah.
Like dog sized. I guess those are like more like rats with giant tails.
Pizza rats. Beware the pizza rats. Pizza Rat and the Primordial Black Hole. A new novel.
Pizza Rat and the Primordial Black Hole. That's just an episode of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, who else is Pizza Rat but Splinter?
Splinter.
Speaking of rats, Jordan Peterson wore fucking tux onto Joe Rogan.
Wait, he just like step down from his position at whatever University of Ontario or something like that?
To become a full-time grifter. Well, he was like in a coma or some shit for a while, right?
Oh, that's right. He had COVID and he was like in Slovenia.
It wasn't
or something,
the
right?
COVID. It was like the I thought it was the meat-only lifestyle choices that then maybe it was COVID. I don't follow Jordan Peterson that closely, but I know it was like he was in a coma or some shit for a minute, and then his daughter took over and was super weird and was like even more extreme than him.
Oh no.
And then once he came out of the coma, he was like kind of not all there.
No, I thought he like got ventilated on COVID because of COVID, and he was in a COVID coma or something like that.
Maybe it was a COVID coma. I thought it was like because he exclusively eats meat.
Well, both of them are reasonable explanations for. I mean, he's got COVID brain. He can't.
Yeah, maybe I only assumed it was because he's dumbass only eats meat. I was like, oh, he's in coma now. Fucking.
That's what happens when you only eat meat.
Yeah, probably hasn't shat in like 3 months and like put him in a coma. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't. Like I said, I don't follow him too closely, but I saw his dumbass wore a goddamn tuxedo onto Joe Rogan onto a podcast, because then I'm like, okay.
Oh, so delete Spotify is trending.
Yeah.
That shit's crazy.
It's pretty funny.
Neil Young is like,
and Joni Mitchell now.
Yeah,
it's like there's a cascade of people who are. If Taylor Swift pulls her music, it's over. It's over. It's over for Spotify. They lost $2 billion off of their market value since that shit started.
Oh man, I already hate Spotify. Like their whole model that doesn't pay musicians for the music that they're borrowing from them because they're streaming it off of somebody else's computer half the time. That's like just
crazy model. Also, Tesla's lost 30% of their stock value in the last month.
Well, dude, what did they? Let's say that they're not even gonna. They're gonna delay production of the truck, the Model 2 and the Model Y or whatever till 2023 or something.
Yeah, at least at the soonest. That's him just saying it's not gonna happen. And now he's doing the little dance about how they're gonna start building fucking humanoid robots, and that's the next big thing for Tesla.
I thought it was it's self-driving.
Wasn't the humanoid robot demonstration just a person in a suit?
It was, but he's seriously trying to push this grift. He's serious. He's serious about this, which is the funniest shit that the media wasn't about to call him out on the fucking suit shit at first. It was only after a few outlets really started ridiculing him where they like, yeah, that's just a person in a suit. The media was just about to let him get away with that shit at first. And they were making it seem like Tesla was about to build these humanoid robots. And fucking people were like, hey, you guys realize that's just a dude in a suit, right? And the media was like, okay, yeah, we'll admit it, okay. It was like with a gun to their head that they had to admit that fucking he tried to grift people that openly.
GM and Toyota and Ford and Honda, they're all leaving the whole self-driving market to Tesla. They're like abandoning the self-driving description. They're like, if they develop autonomous technology, it'll be a driver assist type technology, like the kind of thing that Hyundai is doing. But everything I've read about, like, he's making this really big push for self-driving cars, not calling them autonomous vehicles, like, which already exists as like a description in like a vehicle registry. Mm-hmm. Like it's really kind of, it gets weirder and weirder because he's delaying production of something that's going to make money. I think the real problem is that Ford and GM have been putting a lot of effort into developing lithium iron phosphate batteries. And then there's another battery that's iron air batteries that are being developed. And these things all have incredible potential because they're all fast charging and high capacity and like are able to do all the things. And they're more, they have more reclaimable material type of situation. And so there's a lot of promise. And I think that what's going on is there is now an actual contest for the battery market. Like there's an actual battery wars are actually beginning because it's no longer Tesla Panasonic batteries. It's like Tesla Panasonic versus the world now. And so if they deliver their Tesla truck with their current batteries are going to die because Tesla has no experience building actual trucks that are driven by people who expect trucks to do a certain thing. Whereas Ford and GM, they know. Yeah. Like, who knows better than Ford and GM? Maybe Dodge knows something too, but Dodge is doing their own version of a hybrid truck. They're all doing hybrids really well. Their hybrids are outperforming most of their normal engines up until, except for like the top of the line engines.
I think the Cybertruck is built for glamping.
Of course.
Glamping only.
Well, glamping's cool, but
glamping's cool. That's fine. I mean, that's fine, but Americans don't glamp in reality.
Yeah.
So anybody who thinks they're gonna like buy a Cybertruck and like do what Americans do with it is gonna like end up exploding their battery because it's gonna be probably placed in somewhere that's horribly engineered.
They're gonna.
You mean like buy a Cybertruck and throw a steel ball at the windows?
I think it's more like the person who gets that thing, they're gonna expect it to hang with their neighbor's F-150 or their neighbor's Silverado, and they're going to get to wherever they're going, and then they're going to have to plug into their friend's truck so they can recharge their batteries.
Man.
GM is investing like $7 billion in EV
Yeah,
plants right now.
I think they're doing the iron air. Maybe it's the lithium iron phosphate. But I can't remember. There's a lot of battery terminology and technology that's like emerging, and I'm very interested because I just don't trust the Tesla situation. There's something about it that just, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just like biased because it sets off too many red flags, but it's just because I just expect him to be a con man.
Tesla's product is its stock. It's not any of the stuff that it sells to people.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, that's true.
And then they'll sell like not flamethrowers and shit like that, where you're like, what's going on here? Why do you have to make money off of selling $50 whistles? Did you see the Cybertruck whistle?
What?
What?
They made Cybertruck shaped whistles and were selling them for like $50 or something stupid.
Is it made of like steel?
Yeah, but it's a fucking whistle.
Like a Hot Wheel?
It's called
Not
the
even-
Cyber Whistle.
Yeah,
It's
I'm not
not
making this up.
Wait, it's not a Hot Wheel.
No, it's
That's
just
also a
fucking
whistle? They had an opportunity to make a Hot Wheel shaped like the
did.
Cybertruck that could also function as a whistle, and
But
they didn't.
They just made it a whistle. No
A
wheels.
premium collectible made from medical grade stainless steel with a polished finish.
Yep, I did
The
not
whistle
make this
includes
up.
the whistle includes an integrated attachment feature for added versatility, whatever the fuck that means.
Like, so you can put on a necklace like a coach.
Oh, an integrated attachment feature. Okay.
Because they have to.
Wait, hold on. The Cyber Whistle better blow itself. Because if it doesn't, then it's just a whistle.
Oh, it's just a whistle.
Oh, that's so sad. It's not even a real Cyber Whistle. You know,
Then you go on their website into their shop, and then you see like, oh, their self-driving features like $15,000 or some shit.
So if Dyson and Tesla had a product, baby, it would be a real Cyber Whistle that could blow itself. I'm serious. That needs to happen. There needs to be a Dyson.
$350.
Oh shit! No, it's gonna be like $500 because the battery technology, and it's gonna be like transparent and invisible. It'll fit inside the thing. Actually, the whistle noise will be the sound of the battery discharging into the casing.
So the Cyber Whistle is out of stock.
Of course
but
it is.
If it is back in stock, you can purchase it for the low price of 355 Doge.
Wait, are people is people really still excited about that shit?
No.
I thought Doge died.
He was just trying to. That was one of his most recent grifts. He was saying he was going to meet with the heads of Doge and make it transition to proof of stake, and that never happened because no such people exist. Like, yeah, there's like a community, and there are head devs, but there's no like head of fucking Doge the way he made it sound.
I get it. People think proof of stake is a good thing because if they have any stake at all, then they think they have a voice, but they don't understand that proof of stake is essentially consolidating all the liquidity of a market into a select group of people that have enough share in the market to have stake in the market. So we're talking about banks and financial institutions and maybe maybe a small but powerful think tank / academic research group, but I doubt it. It's probably more like financial institutions at this point, like JP Morgan, and it just blows my mind that people are still suckers for proof of stake. The only reason that there was any really good potential is when proof of work was still viable before it got consolidated by mining consortiums. Mm-hmm. And once that happened, like the little guy just doesn't stand a chance.
Nope.
Like but no individual, unless they've got untold resources, can afford to keep up with a mining consortium. It just doesn't happen. So, and that just sounded a whole hell of a lot like Star Wars, actually. Mm-hmm. Complaining about the consortium.
That's what it's basically setting up, is like the space that is claiming to be decentralizing everything is actually making it worse.
Yeah.
They're concentrating wealth even worse. But they'll tell you they're making it. The common man can come and you just buy a little Bitcoin. You just take a little bit every week, buy some Bitcoin. You'll be fine. You'll be rich. In the future, everybody will be like, I wish I was like this guy who was taking a little piece of money and buying Bitcoin every week. And it's like, that's the way they make it seem as if that is going to like slowly accumulate into this massive wealth where that's just regular saving. But they just want people to think that if you save in Bitcoin, somehow it's going to like blow up and you're going to be disproportionately wealthy then.
But it's saving into a market that relies on someone being foolish enough to want to buy a piece of what you've got for more than you paid for it. That's the dilemma. That's the casino's market there.
That's the resale market.
Yeah.
It sounds like a metaverse thing.
But that's also the problem with reselling. Like reselling, I don't know if it should have never existed, or I mean, it's obviously not going to be something that we could ever take out of existence. But the reselling is the problem. If somebody's not doing the labor or making the product, but they're able to take it and resell it, that's the problem, right there. The reseller, the reselling market. The reselling mentality of like, oh, I'll take this thing and tack on $10, tack on $50, and I'll resell. I'll make money by taking someone else's work and just adding on $10.
Are resellers middlemen?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right.
100%. That's all middlemen are. Is like effectively resellers and repackagers of other people's work and labor.
So like
that's all they do.
So like the heads of companies, basically.
Basically, yeah. Yeah, but they make it seem as if they are needed to make the decisions about the labor because the labor can't organize itself in their framing.
Tell them they need to increase productivity.
Yeah. What are they going to do? Just make a factory and work like a little town or something, as if everybody in the town owns the factory? They need one person to tell them when to come to work and when to leave, when to go to the bathroom.
Or if they can leave.
Right.
You can't leave. You need to finish this pile of stuff.
Says Amazon during a tornado.
Or pay them in special money that they can only spend in the company.
AKA scripts. That's a real thing. That happened in the 1800s.
Yep. Like at the company store.
Yeah. With the notion, oh, if I was going to pay you $1, I'll give you $2 for the company store. How about that? That sounds great. Well, it's fucking manufacturer compliance. That person has no choice but to take the better deal.
It's like the poor bastard whose small town business got run out because of Walmart, and so now they work at Walmart and can't afford to shop anywhere else but Walmart.
And all the production's now in China because that's the only place where they can find a rural factory that is out of government oversight enough to get things made cheaply enough with the labor.
Oh no, I think now they're well within. Like I'm pretty sure Sock Town China or Underwear Town China is fully compliant with whatever they need to be for the U.S. market. They just
yeah now.
I mean now,
definitely now.
Not then, but
not then.
I'm sure that that Microwaveville or the gas range town, I bet those places are fine. I bet they've got it all figured out. The place that makes kitchenettes or kitchen dining sets, they've figured it out too. They've got it all down to a process. Everyone's getting paid. They have a reasonable life. If their kids do well in school, they get to go to ship off to university. You know.
What is it, Shenzhen? That's like the big
mining or the big mass production manufacturing megalopolis.
Yeah, and it's like Shenzhen has changed a lot. Where it used to be like super exploitative, but now they gotta fucking follow the rules with. So it's like
China built a city in Chengdu province just for Intel, like Intel Corporation.
Exceptional Radio.
Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.